Joe, welcome back.
Oh, I'm glad to be back.
This one took a little. It took a little longer, probably like 4 or 5 months now since the last
Right.
time we
It's
spoke.
about that long. Yeah.
We were on a little bit of a tear, but now Joe's back. Telepathy. Let's go straight into it, dude.
Okay.
So you gave a story, and now we've spoken so much I don't remember whether we recorded this or not. But you gave a story about not story. We were talking about your theory about how humans first interacted, and
Right.
through telepathic means was what you were postulating, and it was making sense when we were talking about it. But there was something else that you said within that discussion, that telepathy doesn't work if you lie.
Well, the reason it won't work if you lie is because you can't. When you lie, there's a conscious understanding that that's what you're doing, and so it's delivered that way. It's like a flavor that comes with the message. So if you're in a tribal group back in Cro-Magnon times, or however they pronounce it, if you're back that far and you don't have a language, you can just grunt and point. You're wide open. I mean, if let's say the men are out on a hunt and they're circling an animal that can kill half of them, your focus is in the function of each individual. Everybody knows what the other person's doing. It's kind of like a wolf pack. You know, when the wolves bring down a wounded animal, like a 1,500-pound moose, they got to be really careful because the moose can kill or hurt some of them.
Sure.
And so they all have their individual jobs according to their stature within the unit, the family unit. So they're reading one another very, very well. Well, we did the same thing when we had no language. We had to. That's the only way we could have survived. The same with the hunting and gathering. The women are out in a field of tall grass and bushes, and they're looking for roots. So they're bent over, they're digging and whatnot. And a saber-toothed cat comes into the brush. It's just like a herd of deer. All the heads will come up and they'll look in that direction because they sense the danger.
Mm-hmm.
And they start backing up into a group. They do that because the message is group protects, individuals die. So if you want to lie about that, let's say you want to leave your worst person you get along with in the group out in front, you can't say everybody but you. That's not going to sell. I just think it's a functional impossibility to lie when you're reading minds back and forth, when you're reading one another.
You use the right analogy there, I think, by using the word flavor. The flavor comes out, so it comes out as an anomaly.
Yeah, it's the same kind of issue with the way somebody says something, like stop now, that kind of thing. There's a huge amount of flavor that goes with that, and how you respond is usually based on the flavor, not the word.
I came up with that question because I was listening to a podcast called Telepathy Tapes. I'm not sure if you've heard of them.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a documentarian, and she's gone down this rabbit hole the last 3-4 years, I believe. And she's producing a documentary, and decided while she was producing a documentary, she was going to come out with this podcast to describe the steps and the people that she's been interviewing and engaging with to keep the purity of the. I think I'm using her words here. The purity of the product, because
Right.
after she finishes the documentary, she expects to sell it, and it could be adapted, so on and so forth. But she based she based a lot of her research on this documentary off the research of Diane Hennessy.
Mm-hmm.
Diane Hennessy is a psychiatrist,
Right.
and one of the first psychiatrists in the States to really study research savants, particularly kids with autism or on the autism spectrum.
Right.
So anyway, the long story short, um, the telepathy tapes are about her engaging with these families with autistic kids, and she found out through these kids that they talk about this place they call the Hill, where
Mm-hmm.
they all gather outside of their body. So in the subconscious world, unconscious world, they actually communicate telepathically to each other at a place, quote unquote, called the Hill.
Uh-huh.
And one of the kids explains to his mother that they can do this, and specifically, they can't communicate. It doesn't work if somebody lies.
Right.
So
I
that's
would
why
agree
it
with
brought
that.
it back to the story.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it contramands the whole idea. I mean, it
Right.
spoils the entire idea, the closeness of the communication, that you just wouldn't do it. I mean,
Isn't that
you'd be
amazing?
ostracized immediately.
So let's flow from that a little bit. Um, Language is really an inhibitor, not
Yeah.
not necessarily a tool to help us, but it's an inhibitor to real communication if that's the case.
Right. And that's necessary. And I'll tell you why.
Hmm.
Because at the same time we could read minds, that was fine within the family unit where everybody had this inherent trust for each of the members because you knew where they came from. You knew who raised them. You knew who taught them what they needed to know. And they were an integral part of the machine called the family tribe. And those groups were maybe 15 people max, old people to young people. So at some point, one tribal family had to come across another that was probably on dire straits because let's say that animal did get a good chunk of their men
Sure.
hunting, or they lost some of their women who were the ones who bred the follow-on family members. So they were probably invited into the cave or something and knew that they were like one rung below the family.
Mm-hmm.
So they were doing jobs that need to be done that other people didn't want to do, perhaps. But sitting at the fire, they're relaxed. And the one guy is sitting there looking at the head man's spear, maybe. And he's like, oh man, that's a beautiful spear. If we had had one of those, nobody would have died. And the head man knows that's what he's thinking. And he kills him right on the spot because he can't have that. It's a disturbance of the force, so to speak,
Yeah.
within that family unit. Or even worse, eyeing his woman, perhaps. And he probably had to fight 3 other guys to get the woman. And he's not going to have that. So Mother Nature, like in everything that doesn't work perfectly, starts ensuring that there's changes to counter for that. And I think over time we started developing language because we started having this filter created in our mind somewhere in our brain box up here to prevent the clarity that we had initially.
Yeah. To prevent clarity.
Yeah, to
Interesting.
prevent it,
Yeah.
so that we had to be more communicative with
Yeah.
words in order to explain things, but we could then hide what our real thoughts were.
We can lie.
Yeah, lie.
We can lie better.
Well, it in the beginning, I'm sure it wasn't a lie to get a leg up. It was probably a lie not to hurt somebody's feelings or a lie to
Mm.
make someone more comfortable. Like, man, that dude's really ugly. But I'm not going to tell him that because he's a good fighter. That kind of stuff. I have no idea because I wasn't living then, but it seems to me that if we had to use just straight on mind reading to survive, to keep the human species alive, then when we started developing words and language and everything, it seems to me that would have necessitated some kind of a filter that slowed things down in terms of the mind reading.
Isn't it fun? Isn't it fun to learn these perspectives? I mean, I would have never thought about it before I met you, and then I put pieces of conversations that I would hear or that we've had here on the podcast to see that like these are pieces of a puzzle that is fun to start putting together.
Those autistic kids are very much like we would have been, because they're not communicative like we are. They are withdrawn. They're in their world, and it's hard to understand or even recognize that, but they recognize it in each other. And so their preferred method of communication is something that they can control without the outside world affecting it.
Yeah, you see, there is the difference between what you've just described here is with the autistic kids and potentially our human ancestors. Our human ancestors were not like those autistic kids because they need to have full faculties of their meat sacks in order to feed themselves, whereas autistic kids are not able to, right?
That's
or
right.
At least the ones on the further end of the spectrum. So that's where, for me, also the disconnect is like, why is this existing? Like, so I understand and I believe that they are inhabiting a world that we're ignorant to, or maybe that we've forgotten about.
Well, I think we forgot about it because we don't use it because we have words that we can manipulate people with, and that's kind of like our dark side. I mean, if I can talk someone out of something, or I can talk them out of a raise or whatever, or if I can frame the one guy in the office that's better than me, I'm going to do it because my survival depends on it. So it becomes a function of the reality of surviving better. Yeah.
And so the underbelly of that is maneuvering and hiding.
Yeah, competitive. It's kind of Archaeobellan. I mean, we just
Machiavellian.
That's the word. Yeah.
So I'm glad to ask that question. Well, let me ask another one because you told me this maybe a year ago. I never asked you here on the podcast your near-death experience in Austria.
Oh, yeah.
Do you mind sharing that?
No, which one?
Deep down inside, I had a feeling you would say that.
The most profound one is the one I'll share.
Okay, yeah. Oh, let's start from from the top. Yeah,
I was doing some work and I was stationed in Germany. I was running a intelligence site 250 miles south of the primary unit. We were right on the border, and I had 11 people assigned. It actually was, it started out, it was run by a first lieutenant, but they had a problem. The first lieutenant lost something that was really critical, so he got fired, brought back to the unit, and they had no one else to replace him. And I was a brand new sergeant that had come into the unit, and I walked into the colonel's office, said, "I'll take it." And he said, well, normally we have officers running these units because they need to be sort of ranking, because they have to meet the local police chief and the local Bundeswehr officer in charge and all these kinds of people. And I said, well, give me a shot at it. Let's see what I can do. So I wound up running 3 of these sites because I got a reputation for being very good at it. So
when was this?
This was in my first tour, about, let's see, 1970.
Okay, so this is before you ever started to do any remote viewing spying.
Oh, yeah, long before. Okay. It was 1978. In fact, October of 78 when I got recruited for the remote viewing program.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was a chief warrant officer then, not the sergeant. So I'm running this unit, and I happen to have some work that I was doing outside of Germany, and I can only see my wife like once a month or so because of the job. So I would have her brought to this guest house in Austria. It was called Brunau am See. It was the same town that Hitler was born in.
Oof.
He, and this is kind of a neat story because he was born in a room above a butcher shop. Okay, I'm not lying. This is the truth. And that building became a guest house, modernized.
Wow.
And so I was staying in that guest house. So I had my wife brought there by one of my guys. He brought her there. We're going to stay the weekend together, and then he was going to pick her up and take her back to our quarters where the unit was, and I would stay there finishing the job. I invited him to stay for dinner because that's about the time they got there, on Friday night, dinner time. So we're all in the guest house getting ready to eat, and we ordered before dinner drinks. And I just took a few sips out of my before dinner drink and got desperately sick. I mean, all I wanted to do was projectile vomit, get whatever it was I had just drunk out of my system. So I politely got up and headed for the front door. I didn't want to do it in the restaurant. And right when I hit the door, it was a glass swinging door. When my hand hit the door, it was like somebody snapped their fingers. And I wasn't anywhere near a door. I was standing outside in this sort of soft summer rain over a cobblestone street. I was right in the middle of this cobblestone street. And I had my hands up, like kind of like in front of me. And I was looking at the water. It wasn't collecting in my palms. It was passing through my hands. And I went, whoa, that's really bizarre. What's going on? And I looked up, and there was this body half in and half out of this door. So I went over to it. I drifted over, which should have been a hint.
I would think.
I was so confused.
At least the second
I wasn't
hint.
paying attention. And I got over there, and it was me laying on the edge of the street. And my friend, the guy who worked for me, who brought my wife there, he came out, and they didn't know CPR back then. Nobody did. He just dropped down on the ground and pulled me up in his lap and started hitting me in the chest and yelling at me to breathe because I wasn't breathing. Every time he hit me, I was back in my body looking up at him and having this excruciating pain. So I was trying to say the word stop. And I'd be out again, looking down at him, drawing his hand back to hit me again. This happened like 3 or 4 times. And I finally felt like I said the word stop. And when I did, I stayed out. I couldn't go back in again. And I just watched it pounding on me. Right. I couldn't get back in my body. So I'm watching this. My wife came out. She is completely going crazy. So he said, stay here. And he ran off, and he came back like in a minute and a half with the car. And he was a huge guy. He was actually my generator mechanic. He picked me up, fireman's carried, threw me in the back seat of this car. I can't remember what the car was now. My memory says Volkswagen, but I'm not sure. And they took off, and I'm like, whoa, I took off behind them. So I'm flying along behind the car, watching this, and they went out of Austria they ran a checkpoint into Germany, because back then you had to go through this whole border crossing stuff. Just blew through the border checkpoint. Kept going for quite a while in Germany. And I'm like, 1 minute I'm there and 1 minute I'm somewhere else and then back again. So I don't know. I'm really confused. I had no idea what was going on. And they finally got to this place where he stopped, and it was a clinic, and it was in Passau, Germany. So this had been going on for almost 35 minutes, 40 minutes. I had no heartbeat, no breathing for that entire period. That's according to him and my wife. So they got me to the clinic, and he dragged me out of the car, threw me over his shoulder, and ran to the door. And the door was locked. And I went, oh man, this doesn't bode well. But he started kicking the glass with his foot. And the inner door opened, and this doctor came out with the keys. Now, the doctor was in a wheelchair. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, it's getting better by the minute. I've never seen a doctor in a wheelchair. And I've actually never seen a hospital or clinic with a locked door. But it turns out in Germany, after 8 o'clock, 8 p.m., they lock all their doors to their clinics. This doctor was a part-time doctor. He only worked nights because he was semi-retired. I guess he'd been damaged in an accident or something, and he couldn't walk. So, but he had a nurse. So I watched him carry my body, and I was hovering over myself by then, looking down. It carried me into a emergency OR kind of room. It had two giant bright lights above the ceiling, and it was very bright in there. I remember that. So I'm hovering right under those lights, looking down while they were cutting my clothing off, sticking tubes. I started getting bored. Actually, it was like, what's going on next? You know, what's going to happen next? And I felt like I had heat on the back of my neck. And I thought, that must be one of those intense lights. So I rolled over to see what it was. And I was in a place of nothing, just the most intense white light I've ever been in. But it didn't hurt my eyes, which was strange. And I felt like I was inside a voice that was talking to me. And the voice said, it's okay. Everything's okay. And I was like so comfortable. I felt this intense, overwhelming, all-consuming love and caring. And the voice said, I'm sorry, but you cannot stay. And I went, well, no, I want to go back. You know, it's like the difference between the most primitive place you can imagine and the most beautiful place you could ever be, if you can imagine those two extremes. So I was looking for something to hang on to. I was going to make them drag me out of there, but it was nothing. I'm just in this light. And it was like somebody snapped their fingers again, and I sat bolt upright. And I was naked under a sheet. I had tubes coming out of my nose, and I had IVs and all this stuff. And I found out later I'd been comatose for like 20 hours or something, almost full day. And so I sat up and I looked around, and I was in a room with another patient. It was a German patient. And so I told him first in English, and I told him in German, I said, God's a white light. You can't cease to exist. And you're going to be fine no matter what happens. And he ran out of the room. And the doctor and nurse came in, and I was really excited. I wanted them to know. So I started talking about that, and the doctor told the nurse, give me an injection. I got an injection, went back to sleep. So I don't know how long I was asleep then, but I woke up, it was dawn, early morning, and they were I was on a gurney, strapped down really tight with a mask on my face, and they were loading me into a stretch limo. Now, this limousine had nothing but seats, and they put the gurney up on top of the seats. And all the windows from the front to the back on the sides, and the back window had tinfoil taped over them. And I had no idea what was going on, but we took off. I fell asleep because we were just driving. And they drove 200 and something kilometers to Munich, each in Germany. And when we got there, I was awakened when they carried me into this, it looked like an old folks home, like a rest home. They took me all the way to the back and off to the right wing and all the way to the end. I had the end room. They put me in the end room. And all the other rooms from where it broke off from the main aisle were empty. So I think they leased the whole wing. But I'm in this last room. And when they took the mask off, I'm ready to tell them all about God. And you can't die, you can't cease to exist, all this. And I guess he was a staff psychologist. He said, I don't want to hear about that. You were delivered DOA to the clinic. We need to know how badly your brain has been damaged. I said, there is no damage. He said, well, we don't know that. You went a long time without heartbeat or breathing. Now, I don't for a second think that's true. I think I probably had one heartbeat every 2 minutes, or I had a slow exhale, inhale, or something, because I never felt like I was dead in the normal sense.
Sure.
But I kept telling him, and he got so frustrated with me over 2 days. I think it was about 2 days. He left, and I got a new psychiatrist. And back then, I think they didn't have any equipment where they could check your brain damage, but they absolutely knew, because of the way I was talking, that I had brain damage. They were positive. So they left all the people that worked for me in my unit think that I was dead. The problem was my wife too. So that was not a good thing. Eventually, the second psychiatrist, I was with him maybe only a couple hours, and he looked around and he leaned over and he said, if you want to get out of here, you have to act normal. And he sat back. And I suspect he had dealt with other people that had the same experience I had. So I looked around when nobody was looking. I leaned over and I said, what's normal? And we both broke down in laughter. But within the rest of that day, we had a long conversation, and he got me to tone it down quite a bit. He said, people don't want to hear what you're saying. Their disbelief is palatable. And he said, everybody thinks you're crazy because of the damage from the no blood flow. So I stopped talking about it. And the next day, they decided that there was no serious damage. And so I got reassigned to the 66 Military Intelligence Group in Munich. And that's when they told my wife I was still alive. Now,
That's nice of them.
yeah. Now I got to tell you, maybe that was 1970. Maybe 3 years ago, 5 years ago, I gave a talk in Lynchburg, Virginia, about remote viewing, and it went great. I talked to maybe 80 people, And when it was over, everybody left except for one guy. He was sitting in the back of the room still. He had a black beard. He came up to me and he said, that was a great talk. He said, tell me something. I said, what? He said, do you remember me? And I said, no, I don't. He said, well, I worked for you for 6 months at the place you died. And he said he was stunned to see the advertisement for me giving the talk. And so we had a great talk sitting there, and he said everybody knew I was dead. The thing that disturbed, this is going to sound very common, but the thing that bothered me the most is, I carried a 45 automatic, and this gun had like $2,000 worth of work done on it in 1970. Finest pistol I ever had in the military. And everybody thought I was dead, and it was in the arms room, so nobody could go get it for me. So
Wow.
somebody somewhere got that gun, and it really upsets me because it was just
It was
a
taken.
super
That's it. You lost it.
thing. That's stupid, but I didn't.
Oh,
A lot of my stuff I didn't get back. My personal belongings.
$2,000 in 1970. That's a lot of bread.
It was a lot of money because I had spent that between when I left Vietnam in 1970. So it was a lot of money.
And you were 23, 22, 23?
Let's see.
Still a young
I
guy.
was born in 46,
Okay, so you're 24.
24 years old. Yeah. Senior sergeant. And,
Can I go?
but
Sorry, go ahead.
they never figured out what happened. They think I was poisoned.
Oh, to this day, you don't know.
Well, no, I do.
Do tell.
There are a number of incidents that followed where I garnered some insight, and it turns out the young guy that brought my wife to me had designs on her, and
Dude.
so I think he's the culprit. And I found out later because I paid him a visit. He got out of the Army, so I paid him a visit. He lives in Pennsylvania. And I'll never mention his name or anything, but I'll tell you, I had a long talk with him. And I said, as long as you stay in your home in Pennsylvania and you work in Pennsylvania, you'll be fine. Don't ever leave the state.
Wow.
And to my knowledge, he hasn't.
So he admitted it to you?
Yeah. I challenged him on it.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, everybody was saying, it's the Russians, or it's this terrorist group, or it's that group, or no.
There's a guy who wanted to move in on your woman.
I wanted to move in on my wife.
Holy smokes.
And you're the first guy I'm telling that to, by the way.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. It was, yeah. Took a lot for me to deal with that, but I did, The divorce followed.
I have no words because that's every husband's every husband who loves his wife. That's a legitimate fear.
Yeah. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
And you lived it.
Yeah. But yeah, you have to understand too, in the job I was doing, the intelligence job, I'd come home from being gone 2 or 3 weeks and I couldn't tell her where I was, what I did, any of that, or I'd come home damaged in some way and I couldn't tell her why or how. And that kind of thing. And so, I never really held her responsible in any way. It's just in the intelligence business, if you're married, it takes a person who has the same dedication that the person working in intelligence has to have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Oh, yeah.
the trust has to be absolutely impeccable. It's this is my third wife I'm working on now, and we've been married 40 years. We just had our 40th wedding anniversary,
Ah, congrats.
and the trust between us is absolute. There's no question ever.
There's a magic to that, sir.
There is.
For sure.
There's a lot of magic to it, and people who want to be married a long time, they need to learn that. There's no quid pro.
No,
What
and
she wants,
there's nothing
what I want, I
easy
get.
about it.
We're fine, and we're totally loyal to one another.
Well, yeah, to that I have no doubt, of course, but a testament to what you've done, what you've built through the last 40 years. I don't want to forget what you said as you were. There are two things that you said that were, I mean, the whole story is interesting, but there are two things of interest that I want to explore with you, if you don't mind, during that experience. So, I mean, in a sense, that guy who had designs on your wife kind of did you a favor by giving you that experience, oddly enough.
Yeah. We'll have to talk sometime about hepatitis B I got from a dirty needle from a doctor that worked for one of the agencies. Total alcoholic.
Do you remember in 1980s, that movie, The Never Ending Story? I feel like we're living this.
That's another near-death experience.
Okay, I'm writing that down, Hep B.
That's
but I don't want to forget here what I wrote down during when you said that story.
No, continue with this one, please.
Yeah, let's. So I said there were two things. Now, the first one is when you described yourself looking down on your body on that gurney, and before you turned over to enter into that light.
Yeah.
You used the word bored. That you were bored just watching.
I was getting bored by the whole thing. Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I was dead or dying, and where I was going, I had no idea, but I was still me. And so,
did you see your body as you were looking down at it? Did you identify with that?
Yeah, but it was like, there's the shell I occupied. I don't care about that anymore.
Okay, so this is what we were told.
Stripping clothing off and, okay, what do I put on next? That kind of thing.
One of our past listeners, so we've had a few people come on, talk about their near-death experiences, and there were two in particular that was like just so sharp in their recount. And one of them was with Natalie Sudman. And I think I mentioned this to you on a conversation that we didn't record. She was serving in Iraq, and the convoy that she was in was bombed, and so there were 4 or 5 people in her van that was bombed, and so she left her body, and I'm summarizing. She was looking down on her body like you explained that you were doing, and she didn't describe it as boredom, but she described it as very similar to what you said. It was her, but it wasn't really her. And she was with other beings at the time.
Right.
She recalled other beings, and they were looking down at her body, and then they were having fun and laughing at the creative injuries that they were giving her body as they were watching it. And they had fun with that.
Yeah. You just realize this is a primitive place, extremely primitive. You don't believe that when you're here.
Yeah.
But when you're not here, you can see just how rudimentary it is, how basic. And when you're out of the body, it's like, I don't need that anymore. It's like, I don't need to be there anymore. I got to be wherever I need to be, but not here.
Hey there. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Behind Greatness. Just wanted to take a quick moment just to let the listener know what we're about. We've been doing this since 2011, the podcast since 2020. We're a completely volunteer-run and non-for-profit. We do not partner with any sponsors. We're self-funded, and we also receive help from donors like you who listen to the show. If you are so inclined to donate, feel free to do so. You can go to our website, behindgreatness.org, see all the fun stuff there, including our contact library. If you're not able to help, no big deal. We appreciate your listenership, number one. And number two, if you can review, share on whatever platform you use, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else, be much appreciated. All of this helps us to have wonderful conversations with the guests that we have on the show. Now, back to the episode. You were advised by this other human being, you're back in your body. You were advised by this other human being not to sound crazy if you wanted to escape that place that you were trapped in, like that they trapped you in.
Right.
But all you wanted to do was share like this beautiful experience that you had. That's like, that was your instinct. And the words that you said he used to you, you're now back in this primitive place. You've come to the realization that personally, that your body is just a suit, it's just clothing, it's not you.
Right.
And you hear the words, you got to be careful because these are the 4 words here that I wrote. Their disbelief is palpable.
Yeah.
So people in this primitive place, now that you see as a primitive place, have a disbelief that is so palpable, they don't want to know that they are in a primitive place.
And what's so juxtaposition to that, I mean, just so different, is that's what you get when you're in church, when you're talking to philosophy, people with philosophic belief. It's what you're taught. It's what you read. It's that magical thing that's going to happen. But when it happens and you try to talk about it, nobody wants to talk to you about it. It's like, no, I don't believe you. Oh my God, you think that'd be the first thing they want to know about? And so you learn not to share it. You definitely lose all your fear of death and dying, because now you know that, yes, you're not going to be exactly like you are in the body, but something good is going to be happening. The new clothes are really cool. Whatever it is you're getting ready to do is so more important, because it's embedded, couched in, part of, comes out of nothing but, it's not an appropriate word. It's like perfect love, but it's not that. It's better. It's like a total commitment to everything, and you're like, you understand it. It's like the understanding is what does it. I'm not explaining it very well.
No. Let's stay on that, because what I want to share with you is I've been playing with these thoughts the last, I don't know, several months, for sure since the first time we spoke, maybe a year ago. Maybe it isn't love. Like a lot of people, I haven't gone through an experience like this. So for me, I want to learn what people are saying. And it's very consistent across the board so far in what I've listened to and what I've learned. Maybe it's not love. Maybe it's more an empathetic state.
Well, certainly, it is certainly that. And I think the problem that we're faced with is, no matter what you say, it's never enough.
That's what I've heard.
It's all of that stuff. And it is where one thing leaves off, another starts. Or it's all interwoven. It's like, it's like you part of it. And when you recognize you're part of it, you're enmeshed in it completely. And it's the place you want to be. It's the place you want to think, you want to be, you want to do that kind of thing. And you start you don't even ask yourself the questions like, well, why did I believe this all my life? Why did I believe that? No, it's kind of like, the way I try to explain it is, there's this thing everybody writes about where, and when you die, you review your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's
the life
instantaneous review. But you got to think, okay, I'm 79 right now. So That's a long review. But let me tell you, it happens in an instant. And the reason why it does is because it's not actually a review, it's an acceptance of everything all at one time for your whole life. It the only way I can the only way I can explain it is if I make a decision, I'm 39 years old or 35 years old, whatever my age, I make a decision and I do something, I get an experience from that. What I don't get is the whole experience. I only get my little portion, my
Yeah.
little part.
Right.
So when you are no longer here, what you get is the full dump. You get all the experience of all the parts of you that were there. That means everybody that was with you that's affected, everybody that's not with you that's affected, you get all of their experience. So it becomes a complete total package. And instead of having to review, it's a total dump. For your entire life, everything you ever did is just dumped. The whole experience, not just the pieces. So it's like remembering, not reviewing.
Yeah. It sounds like remembering from the outside rather than remembering from the inside.
It's both. It's actually both. And where the problem comes in is translating that
Mm,
in the feel. I thought about this a long time, and the best way I can explain it for me, this is my explanation. No one else is in it, and you know me. I'm subject to change in the next 3 to 5 minutes.
sure.
But in my construct, the way I feel about it is this is how this is where the definition of heaven and hell came from. If you get this entire dump of your entire life, the full experience, not just your little piece, but the full experience, if you feel okay with that, or you feel like you could do better, that's heaven. Can you imagine how someone like Mao Zedong felt when he met his full experience dump? He he
Wow.
he's a guy who took what 50 million lives.
Yeah, I was gonna say 40, but yeah, 50 is probably closer.
So that's hell. So if you think you're going to escape something, no, you do it to yourself. That's the promise. That's a promissory note that you collect on. Is you do it to yourself. Now you got to figure out how to maybe produce recompense for that, or how do you deal with that? I mean,
You called it. You said earlier. You referred to that as collecting all the parts of, like, all the parts of you remember that.
right.
Can I infer that you mean, or that you might believe, that we're really just shards of a whole, like we think we
Absolutely.
are?
Absolutely. Every time we do something that creates an experience, it has some value. That value is not just for us, it's for all parts of us. So the idea that we have is that we're alone in the universe, is just us. Now, one of the things you find out is no, we're part of one another.
Mm,
So everybody I've ever interacted with in my lifetime from birth to death is part and parcel of me to some extent. So I feel when I made decision A, no matter when it was, I feel the effects of that from everybody I'm a part of in that moment. In other words, they get that experience too because of something I do. And I get the same from them. So they feel I'm part of them as well. And we're blocked from that here. That's part of the not learning, the experiential package here. See, I don't think we do this to learn anything other than more about who and what we're part of. So when people tell me, you need to be Buddhist, you need to be Islamic, you need to be Catholic, you need to be Protestant. No, 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 no. All those things, because those prophets all say the same exact thing. Every single one of them. It's humans that make the divergent understandings about it. We write things about it, say, no, this is what you have to do. No, that's human intervention on the actual story.
Just hearing your rationale, it further informs me that empathy is more important than love. I think love is a part of
It's part of it's what comes out of it.
Yeah.
But empathy, having an understanding for your actions, is taking full responsibility for it.
And empathetic as somebody else's point of view on the same experience.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't control all that. But if you have as much empathy as possible about what it is you intend, the expectation for the outcome becomes better. During, after, and beyond. I mean,
this is I've also said this before on the podcast. We've had various actors, theater actors, Hollywood actors, TV actors, since the beginning, really. And we like to have more because we like to talk about how they apply their trade in their day, in their life, in their philosophy.
Yeah.
And it's like there's, again, a common thread there that's very similar, runs parallel to what we were just hearing from you. Uh-huh. Because in order to act out a role that is not you, you have to understand it and understand that it is or can be a part of you. Like you have to understand yourself as that shard.
Yeah. Well, everything's always a part of us. That's the whole answer right there. I mean,
that's a key.
To deny that is to walk totally ignorant through life. I mean, 100%. Completely, totally ignorant. To do otherwise, to really think about it and come to the conclusion. I'm not saying that I make, but just to come to a conclusion that is worth living, worth investing in, is, I think, the all that's really being asked of us as entities.
Well, let's see. I want to ask you a question about speaking of shards and threads and pieces and pieces of puzzles. What, I didn't ask you this before. I don't know what pushes me to ask you, but what do you think? Have you ever thought about what deja vu is, the experience of deja vu?
Yeah. There, I can't remember his name now. There's a scientist who has researched that to the hilt. And what he says, and I'm not saying he's absolutely correct, I'm just saying it's an answer that I can live with because of the way he explains it. Deja vu is kind of like a frivet in thought. It's our brain box works a certain way. Things are interconnected a certain way. There's sort of a logic pattern in the way we think. Once in a while, we skip a part and it comes earlier than it should. One part comes earlier than it should, and then we get to the point where we should have had it. But it just came earlier because it's stored in our memory. What that implies is that we sort of, you were talking about actors before, we sort of sign this script for being born, living a life, and dying, where we can have the very experiences in their whole form that tells us more about what we're a part of. I think as living entities, what we are is we're perhaps the grand engineer or the architect of reality trying to understand what it is. And I'm just kind of throwing that out there because I don't know. I just know that each and every human being plays an integral part in the learning about the limits, the breadth of everything. I don't think if you were an architect and you had to design this cosmos, how could you possibly understand what you were other than to be tied in directly
Other than
in
being the
some
cosmos.
conscious way with your very creation?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the importance of it. Now, people say, well, you're kind of validating people who do bad things, like I was talking about Hitler being born over a butcher shop. Maybe he's necessary. I don't believe that. I believe that there's the freedom there to expand on almost anything because you're not going to know the whole answer unless you allow that freedom to go places that maybe we shouldn't be going. In other words, maturity in the experience comes from making decisions in a mature way, in a way that is constructive, not destructive. You have the destructive anyway because there are people that never mature or entities that never mature.
Yeah.
They run off in extremes. But if that freedom isn't there, how would you know you had all the information? You'd have to allow that.
So in
We're
my
getting into some really deep philosophic things now, and
I enjoy it. I enjoy it. Like,
it's where I am, just from my experience.
well, we've been saying it from the beginning here at the podcast. Like, how can you not have this bent with all the experiences that you've had, right? Like
Yeah,
your otherworldly experiences, so to speak, and your 3D experiences. Like, I mean,
and
you've seen the worst and the best.
don't think for a second I've done nothing but good things. I've done bad things in my life.
Sure.
In hindsight, I've done good things in my life by accident. I mean, life
Those are the good
itself
accidents.
is a challenge, and we face all kinds of things that cause us to go one way or the other in the moment. There's very little deep thought that goes into something, but the maturity comes over time.
Yeah.
And from experience, because you got to understand, experience is the one thing we take with us.
Well,
That's the heaven and hell.
well, here's the inhibitor to experience, I think, with a lot of young people, including me as a young person, because in our regular everyday lives in the Western world here, where we've always been taught to go to school and go to church on Sundays and do your homework, work hard, get a job, have a profession so you can feed your family, and you do that, right?
Right.
And but all the while, you're a kid and you're exploring and you're getting hurt and you're exploring and you're making mistakes and you're exploring and you're
Right.
being imaginative and
Right.
but for a while that goes hand in hand with what the real world is. When I say real, I mean real in quotations. What the real world is
Yeah.
demanding of you in your future, and then of course after a while it takes over. Your
Right.
practical reality takes over, and then as a young adult, like I always felt inferior to those who knew more than me, who were more knowledgeable than me. And I wanted to be like those people who are more knowledgeable,
Mhm.
who are more left-brained, astute and sharper than me. Because I wanted to be that. I venerated that. And I'm not saying it's because of me. I think most of us do that.
Well, we
But
idolize some things. Absolutely.
but well, that's the thing too, is that that's also a block, right? Because that's half the
Yeah.
experience. It's, I'd say, less than half, but let's just say, for the sake of this conversation, that's half the experience. Like the other half of the experience is the feeling,
Yeah.
and walking in and leaning into that.
But see,
Um,
all of that is the freedom of choice, the freedom of
sure.
truth. As long as we're learning something from it, as long as
Yes.
we're garnering some information, some uh, some growth, some positive movement. But the problem, I think, is it's either so slow or sometimes hampered.
Yes.
Like uh, I when I first realized that what you're realizing, that I really wanted to know more. I I I couldn't see a degree in anything telling me what I need to know. What, like, if I wanted to know something about why people do something, I would go and take courses. So I enrolled in a teachers college in New York, upstate New York.
Mhm.
And for 25 years, when I wanted to know more about something, I would go and take those courses. And I think I was about 74 at the time when they called me on the phone one day and said, "You can't do this. You have to have a degree. You go here to get a degree." I said, "Oh, it doesn't make any sense to me. Well, I thought you go to school to learn something. And when I want to learn something, that's what I do." And I remember the woman said, "No, well, you can't do that at this college. You have to come here to get a degree, or your teacher, you come here to expand on your degree." So I said, "Okay, so what do I need to get a degree?" And she said, "Well, there's these numerous subjects you can get a degree, but you have at least one course to finish for anything." So I said, "Okay, what what deals with knowing why people do things?" And she said, "Oh, that would be like sociology." And I said, "Cool, that's what I want." "Well, you can't have it." I said, "Why not?" She said, "Because they're going to do away with it in the next 30 days. It's going to be replaced by a course called the humanities."
Hmm.
So I said, "Okay, well, what's in humanities?" And she said, "We don't know yet." So I said, "No, no, no. I want the sociology. What do I have to do to get it?" She said, "You had to take one course." So I agreed. And right when I started the course, I was in a car accident. Somebody hit me head on. So I'm back in the hospital having my spine fixed again.
Jesus,
So that
Joe.
last month, I'm laying flat on my back with a laptop tucked up under my chin doing this, writing papers and stuff. It was a nightmare. But I got my degree. I graduated within the month and got
Of course you did.
sociology, and then everybody else got humanities. And it was funny because I'm up in upstate New York graduating with a bunch of kids, and they assigned 5 postgrads to me so I wouldn't wander off. They said, "He might wander off, he's an old guy." And
You
so I
had
have these
no idea.
babysitters. It was really fun, but all my all my credit hours went out the window. I had like 320 credit hours gone.
It, again,
But I have a
what is it?
degree.
Yeah, but the credit hours, degree, who cares? Like,
Right, it didn't matter to me. It's like,
shit. You were looking at your body from the top of a room, and
yeah,
turned over, saw a light, and you wanted to tell people, you wanted to tell the world that
yeah,
death doesn't exist. Like, who cares about credits?
right.
it's
In
it's all
fact,
consequential.
I and that's what I've been doing the rest of my life. Is everything I could do to reinforce what I know to be true, I do. Everything that I can teach to someone, I teach. Every person I could talk to about it, I talk to about it. And that's why I do your podcast. That's why I do other podcasts. It's important because humanity is stuck. And I'm not talking about America, Canada, Russia, China. I'm talking about the entire species. We're stuck. It's like we don't improve. We go year to year to year doing the same stuff. When if we really understood, we could do so much to grow so fast. We could transition out of this primitive place. We could go somewhere else, be something else, do something greater. But the greatest thing here is more money you got, the more power you have.
Yeah.
It's the exact opposite. It's like handing somebody their first piece of candy, you know, and that's what they want the rest of their life.
It's a great analogy because the candy is full of sugars and it's addictive and it's short-lived, so you got to have more.
Highly addictive, right?
Yeah.
It's like people ask me, do you ever have spontaneous out of bodies? I said, no, I had those for a while, and then I learned how to control them. So I can go out of body, sure. And they say, well, that must be really exciting. I said, no, what's exciting about it is when you go out of body and you accidentally back into a crystal chandelier. It's like, whoa, you could spend 2 days inside a crystal chandelier.
Holy smokes.
That's just more physical stuff.
On that, I didn't mean to ask you this question, but when you've left your body on any occasion that you've left your body, have you felt like you were, maybe when you were re-entering your body, that you were in a fight for it?
Never.
Never.
It's like there's a permanent connection. I don't see a silver cord. I don't see any of that. In fact, when I had a particularly bad surgery, you know, every now and then you wake up from surgery and the anesthesia, you lose the anesthesia, you wake up, you're consciously awake, but from the chest down, anesthesia has got you in a lock.
Paralysis, yeah.
It's paralysis. So your digestive system isn't working, but your body keeps producing acids. The only way to wake up the entire body is to take the person off everything. Painkillers, drugs, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is it is excruciatingly painful. And that happened. And so the doc came in and I said, how long am I going to have to live with this? And he said, oh, it could be a couple hours. It could be a couple days. It could be a couple weeks. We don't know. And
the Pepsi story?
Like, huh?
Is this the Pepsi story?
Yes. So
that's a good one. Sorry, go ahead.
So I said, this didn't work for me. So I told my wife, I said, I can't be here. I'm in so much agony right now. I can't deal with it. And I had dealt with pain a long time because of my injuries. But so she said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going somewhere, anywhere, doesn't matter. So I closed my eyes and went out of body. And I just kept going. I went up into the heavens, started looking at the constellations and things, and just kept going and going and going. And I reached this place where something caught my interest, and it was 6 stars, 3, 2, and 1. It was like a perfect triangle.
Mm-hmm.
And they all had equal brilliance. Now, my first thought was it was the perspective that I had, because one star could be 100 light years behind the others, but brighter. And another star could be up here, but looking at it at that particular angle showed me a triangle. No, it was a plane of 6 stars, all in the same spot, equal illumination. And it just like blew me away. So I'm watching this, and as I'm watching it, I'm thinking, what am I feeling? And I had no feeling. And where am I? I had no idea where I was. What's my name? I couldn't even remember my name. That's how far out I was. And I started drifting back. And as I started drifting backward, I started accelerating. So by the time I got back to my body, I'm smoking air. I am. And I just click, and I sat up, still in agony. And that's when I said, get the doctor in here. I want to talk to him. And I demanded, I think it was a 18-ounce full-blown Pepsi Cola on ice. And he said, no. Oh, it was Coca-Cola is what it was. He said, no. That'll make it worse because your body won't be able to digest it and everything. And we argued for like over an hour. And he finally got angry, and he told the nurse, said, pull everything, the wires, the monitoring device, pull everything. Pull the tube. I had a tube in my nose. It was removing the stomach acid. He said, pull the tube. He's going to regret it, but get him the Coca-Cola. I took like 3 sips, and my whole body woke up. And
Wow.
He was stunned. And I said, it's called primitive medicine, Doc. You got to try it sometime. You just shock the body, and it does that.
The shamans in Peru do it.
Yeah. Coca-Cola, you can do anything with it. We used to clean the dirt and stuff out of wounds with it.
In the war. Yeah.
In the war.
Yeah. I remember those stories.
Yeah.
Joe, as usual, enlightening when we speak. I want to keep going. There's
sure.
lots of things to talk about. I told you before we started recording, I have like 11 loose points that I put together just the other day that I didn't want to forget, and I think we only hit 3.
Sure. Go ahead.
There's so yeah. If we can have you back, I want to hit at least another 3.
Sure, that'd be fine. Not a problem.
Okay,
I like
we will
talking with you, Luciano. You keep my interest.
Yeah.
You give me a place where I can express what I'm feeling and the things I think are true. Sometimes I change my mind about things because I find out more, but I never stop thinking about them. I just wish I could reach more people that are suffering, that are in situations like stage 4 cancer, or been reached that point in age where they're fighting to stay alive. And you don't have to, you have a choice, and it's a shame we can't provide it, without some laws preventing it, that kind of thing. Nobody has to be in pain or agony.
And I'm with you, Joe. Hopefully we reach more and more people as the days, weeks, and months go on with the airing of this episode, and your others and the future ones. That's what we want.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a call. We'll figure out another date and time.
Yes, man.
It'll be sooner than this last break.
Yeah, well, sooner for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Until then, Joe.
Cool. Thanks, man.